Good morning, family. This is Ricky, and welcome to Hope for Today. Happy Thursday. I pray that you and yours are enjoying a wonderful week. And if not, know that we are praying for you nonetheless. I want to talk to you today about generosity. Matthew chapter 6, Jesus is talking here. And in verse 21, it reads this way. Jesus says, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." I want to talk to you about generosity. One of the defining and signature features of the Christian experience is generosity. Why do we say that? Because one of the defining signature expressions of God's love is his generosity towards us. God gave so liberally to humankind that he sent his son to perish on a cross for our sins. I am saved today because God was generous towards me. And now he says to you and I as believers that one of the expressions of what it means to be Christian is to be generous. Okay. Now stay with me because I'm not really talking to you about your money. That's your business. I'm not really talking to you about, what to do and all that good stuff. I'm simply saying that if you don't have a generous heart, you probably don't have an abundant faith. That's really what I'm trying to say. If you don't have a generous heart, you probably don't have an abundant faith. Jesus is talking in Matthew chapter 6, where he says, don't lay up for yourselves treasures on earth and lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. And he talks about how your eye has to be full of light. And of course, it's a lot of metaphor in there, but what we understand Matthew 6 to be about is Jesus is saying, beware of greed. And one of the reasons I think we have to beware of greed is because 9 times out of 10, if we're greedy, we usually don't know it. Which is one of the reasons why Jesus says you have to have good eyes. You know why it's so hard for us to feel greedy? Because we're all surrounded by somebody who's way more greedy than us. And it's real hard to feel any kind of conviction about your greed when you see somebody who's living way more lavishly than you. And so I want a Corvette. Okay. I think I ought to have a Corvette. I think y'all ought to email my wife and tell her I need to have a Corvette. I'm fine with used. It is what it is. And here's the thing. I have no business getting a Corvette. It's too much money. I don't need it. I can't afford it. So I don't need one. But here's why I don't feel bad about it. Because when I go to my neighborhood, it's like 19 Corvettes in there. So it's really hard for me to look at my stuff because what? I'm looking at everybody else's stuff, so much so that Jesus says that your eye needs to be full of light. What Jesus is saying is you need to be aware of your greed. And one of the ways to curb it is with generosity. Who is God calling you to be generous to? What vision, what mission, what cause is Jesus saying, you know what? I want to break your greediness by doing something for me and being generous. And here's what I'm trying to tell you. It'll free you up and bless you more than you could possibly imagine. So much so that Jesus says where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Imagine if you hated football, but everybody at the office said, hey, put $5 in for this little game pool that we're going to have. And you're like, I'm not putting my money on that. I don't even watch. But they're like, hey, I'll pay the $5 for you. And you said, okay, fine. And you guys are all at the Super Bowl party and you hate football. You never wanted to watch it. But for whatever reason, you are tuned to the game and things are happening at the game and you are paying attention. And when your team does well, you're excited. When your team doesn't do well, you're like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And you're just all of a sudden into it. Why? Because that's where your treasure is. So your heart is there as well. Jesus is saying that's what happens when you are generous to his kingdom and to his causes. You now are tuned in because you didn't put money in it too. So, okay, the church is building this, or okay, the Red Cross is doing that, or okay, I helped that single mom at our church and she's doing, and you're tuned into it because that's where your treasure is. And guess what? In the same situation where that person paid for your $5, Jesus told me to tell you he paid for whatever you put in as well. It all belongs to him and it ought to go to where his heart is. And Jesus says, if your treasure is where his heart is, that means your heart will be where his heart is. And that's hope for today. I'll see y'all next time.